I'm Mason Crawford, 32 years old, and I never thought my own parents would betray me like this. After a brutal breakup, I moved back home and spent 6 months transforming their musty basement into a gorgeous apartment, investing $17,000 of my savings. Just when I felt secure again, they dropped the bomb. I had 30 days to leave so my sister Diana could move in. The shock and disbelief I felt that night still haunts me. Before I continue this family betrayal story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to see how I made sure I got back every penny and more. Life has a way of humbling you when you least expect it. Before moving back to my parents' house, I was doing well as an electrician with my own apartment and a relationship I thought would lead to marriage. Then I discovered Amanda, my girlfriend of 5 years, had been cheating with her coworker for months. I found text messages on her phone when she asked me to check the weather one morning. The evidence was undeniable, and our relationship ended that same day. The breakup left me emotionally drained. Not only did I lose my partner, but we had been sharing an apartment that neither of us could afford alone. Amanda's parents bought out my portion of the lease, and I found myself without a home at 32 years old. "You can always stay with us until you get back on your feet," my father Richard offered when I called to tell them what happened. My mother Elaine chimed in on speakerphone. "The basement is just sitting there empty. It's not much, but it's private." I accepted their offer with gratitude, expecting to stay for a few months while I saved for a new apartment. When I arrived with my belongings, I realized the basement was in worse condition than I remembered. The concrete floors were cold and cracked. The drop ceiling was stained from old water damage. The lighting consisted of a few bare bulbs that cast harsh shadows. A small bathroom in the corner had fixtures from the 1972nd, and the walls were covered in dark wood paneling that made the space feel like a cave. After a sleepless first night on an air mattress in that depressing space, inspiration struck. As an electrician with friends in various construction trades, I had the skills to transform this basement into something special. Instead of paying rent, I proposed to my parents over breakfast. What if I renovate the basement? I could turn it into a proper apartment. My father's eyes lit up. "You could do that. Really make it livable down there." "Absolutely. New electrical, drywall flooring, proper bathroom, even a small kitchen area. It would add value to your house, and I'd have a decent place to stay while I rebuild my savings." My mother seemed thrilled. "That would be wonderful, Mason. We've wanted to fix up that basement for years." We shook hands on the deal. I would provide the labor and materials in lieu of rent, with the understanding that I could stay for at least 1 to 2 years. No contracts were signed. After all, these were my parents, and I trusted them completely. I threw myself into the renovation with the focus of someone trying to heal. Each day after my regular job, I'd work 4 to 5 additional hours on the basement. Weekends were entirely dedicated to the project. The physical labor helped channel my emotional pain into something productive. First came demolition, tearing out the musty paneling, removing the drop ceiling, and jackhammering the cracked sections of the concrete floor. My friend Jake, a contractor, helped me with the heavy lifting and advised on the construction sequence. Next, I addressed the foundational issues. I sealed cracks in the walls, installed a proper sump pump, and applied waterproofing treatments. The last thing I wanted was to build out a beautiful space, only to have it flood during the first heavy rain. With the basement now a blank canvas, I began the real transformation. I installed new electrical wiring throughout, adding recessed lighting, wall sconces, and plenty of outlets. I built stud walls and hung drywall, creating separate spaces for a bedroom, living area, and kitchen. I installed insulation to keep the space warm and reduce sound transfer. For the bathroom, I gutted the existing closet-sized space and expanded it, adding a walk-in shower with glass doors, a modern vanity, and proper ventilation. The kitchen area received cabinetry I found on clearance, stainless steel appliances. I purchased new and quartz countertops that were a splurge but worth every penny. The flooring transformation was dramatic. I installed luxury vinyl plank that looked like hardwood but would stand up to the occasional basement moisture. I painted the walls in warm, neutral tones and added trim work that gave the space a custom look. One of the most significant improvements was creating a separate entrance. I widened an existing window, well-installed concrete steps, and added a steel door that provided security and independence. Now I could come and go without disturbing my parents. The final touch was furnishing the space with a combination of new purchases and quality second-hand finds. When completed, the 800-square-foot basement looked like something from a home renovation show, modern, comfortable, and unrecognizable from its former state. The project took 6 months and $17,000 of my personal savings, not counting the countless hours of labor. My parents were amazed by the transformation. "I can't believe this is the same basement," my mother said during the grand reveal. "You could charge rent for a place like this." "You've increased the value of our home by at least $30,000, my father added, slapping me on the back. "You've got a real talent, son." I settled into my new apartment with pride. The space was comfortable and completely mine. I established a routine: early mornings at the gym, days at work evenings spent either in my apartment or occasionally joining my parents upstairs for dinner. The arrangement worked perfectly. I began rebuilding my savings and slowly healing from my breakup. For the first few months, everything seemed ideal. Then I began noticing odd behavior from my parents. They would abruptly end phone conversations when I entered the room. I caught them whispering to each other on several occasions. When I asked if everything was okay, they would smile too brightly and change the subject. "Just discussing some boring retirement stuff," my father would say, or "nothing important, just planning a surprise for someone," my mother would deflect. I dismissed my concerns, attributing their behavior to some private matter that wasn't my business. After all, they had been nothing but supportive since my return home. I had no reason to suspect the betrayal that was coming. My younger sister Diana and I have always had a complicated relationship. Growing up, she was the family favorite, the artistic one with big dreams who could do no wrong. 3 years younger than me, Diana had moved to California after college to pursue a career in fashion design. While I stayed in our hometown building a practical career as an electrician, Diana chased her dreams in Los Angeles, rarely returning home except for major holidays. Our parents never hid their pride in Diana's ambitious pursuits, often introducing her as our daughter, the fashion designer in Los Angeles, while I was simply our son, the electrician. I had made peace with this dynamic years ago, focusing on building a stable life rather than seeking their approval. The first hint of Diana's return came during a routine Sunday dinner upstairs with my parents. My mother mentioned casually, "I spoke with your sister yesterday. Her fashion startup is having some issues." "What kind of issues?" I asked, more out of politeness than genuine interest. "Financial problems," my father interjected. "Apparently their investor pulled out, and they had to close the studio." My mother sighed dramatically. "She's taking it pretty hard. She put everything into that business." I offered the appropriate sympathetic response while inwardly wondering if Diana had finally experienced the reality check that comes when dreams collide with practical matters like paying bills. 2 weeks later, my mother dropped the real news. "Diana is moving back home for a while to regroup, just until she figures out her next steps." "That's probably good for her," I replied. "When is she coming?" "Next week. We're preparing the guest room upstairs for her." The arrangement seemed reasonable. The guest room was small but comfortable, and having Diana upstairs while I occupied the basement would give everyone enough space. Diana arrived with 6 suitcases and an air of defeated entitlement. Dinner, that first night, was all about her: the betrayal by her business partner, the unfairness of the Los Angeles fashion scene, the trauma of having to leave her apartment. My parents clucked sympathetically, offering encouragement and support while I nodded along, trying to be understanding despite her flair for drama. After dinner, Diana asked to see my basement apartment. I gave her the tour, feeling a strange pride in showing off my handiwork. "Wow, this is actually really nice," she said, sounding genuinely surprised. "It's like a real apartment down here. You did all this yourself?" "Most of it. Had some friends help with the plumbing and heavy lifting, but yeah, I designed and built it out." Diana walked slowly through the space, running her hand along the countertops, opening cabinets, testing the water pressure in the shower. "This is so much bigger than the guest room," she commented. "And you have your own entrance, and everything." Something in her tone made me uneasy, but I dismissed the feeling. Diana had always been envious of anything I had. The next morning I overheard Diana complaining to our mother about the guest room. "It's tiny, Mom. I can barely fit my clothes in that closet. And the desk is too small for my design work." "I know it's not ideal, honey, but it's just temporary," my mother responded. "I don't understand why I'm crammed in that little room when Mason has a whole apartment downstairs. He has an actual living room and kitchen." "Well, he did build that space himself." My mother's voice trailed off. "So he's been living here rent-free, right? I need more space if I'm going to rebuild my portfolio and start over." I walked away before hearing my mother's response, an uncomfortable feeling settling in my stomach. That evening I noticed my parents exchanging meaningful glances during dinner. Diana kept making comments about her cramped quarters upstairs, sighing dramatically whenever the basement was mentioned. The situation escalated the following week when Diana announced that her boyfriend Trevor would be visiting from Los Angeles. "He's considering moving here too, so he needs to see the area," she explained. "He'll stay in my room with me." My parents seemed uncomfortable but agreed. Trevor arrived 2 days later, a tall surfer type with an expensive watch and vague talk about digital marketing opportunities he was exploring. The visit that was supposed to last 3 days stretched into a week, then 2 weeks. The house felt crowded. Trevor and Diana would sleep until noon, then take over the kitchen for elaborate brunches. They commandeered the living room for movie marathons and filled the upstairs bathroom with specialized grooming products. My parents seemed increasingly stressed, but said nothing. I began overhearing arguments between my parents when they thought no one was listening. "This isn't working, Elaine," my father said one night. "The house is too full." "I know, but what are we supposed to do? She's our daughter. She needs our support right now. Mason's our son, too, and he's been nothing but responsible. He's the one who actually improved our house. Diana's always been more sensitive, you know that. She needs more help getting back on her feet. Mason is established in his career. He could find his own place easily. We made an agreement with him about the basement." "Yes, but circumstances have changed. We need to think about what's best for both our children." Their conversation confirmed my growing suspicion that something was brewing, but I still wasn't prepared for what came next. Sunday family dinners had been our tradition since I moved back home. Usually they were pleasant affairs with good food and casual conversation. But this particular Sunday the atmosphere felt different. My mother had prepared all my favorite foods: pot roast garlic, mashed potatoes, and apple pie for dessert. Red flag number 1. My parents were unusually quiet, exchanging glances throughout the meal. Red flag number 2. Diana, however, seemed cheerful, almost smug. Red flag number 3. As my mother served dessert, my father cleared his throat. "Mason, we need to discuss something important with you." I put down my fork, my appetite suddenly gone. "What's up?" My father stared at his plate, unable to meet my eyes. "Your mother and I have been talking, and we think, well, given the current situation with Diana moving back." My mother jumped in. "What your father is trying to say is that we need to make some changes to our living arrangements." I looked between them, already knowing what was coming but needing to hear them say it. "What kind of changes?" "We think it would be best if Diana took over the basement apartment," my father finally said. "She needs more space for her design work, and with Trevor potentially moving here too." "You're kicking me out." The words felt surreal leaving my mouth. "After I renovated the entire basement with my own money." "Not kicking you out," my mother said quickly. "Just asking you to find your own place. You're established in your career. You have savings. Diana is starting over from scratch." Diana finally spoke up, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "I'm really sorry, Mason. I know it's not ideal, but I really do need the space more than you right now." When I asked, my voice tight. "We think 30 days is reasonable," my father replied. "That should give you enough time to find an apartment." 30 days, I repeated numbly. "And what about the $17,000 I invested in renovating your basement? The countless hours of labor? The agreement we had that I could stay for at least a year?" My parents exchanged another glance. "We understand it's not entirely fair," my mother admitted. "We're prepared to give you $2,000 to help with your moving expenses and compensate for some of the work." "2,000? I laughed incredulously. "The materials alone cost more than 3 times that." I installed new electrical plumbing drywall flooring. I built a kitchen from nothing. $2,000. Doesn't even cover the appliances I bought. The improvements you made are to our house, my father countered, his tone hardening. The agreement was that you did the work instead of paying rent. You've lived here 8 months rent-free in a nice apartment. An apartment I created. I stood up, unable to contain my anger. That basement was unlivable before I transformed it. You're stealing my investment and giving it to Diana. Diana rolled her eyes. Don't be so dramatic. It's just some paint and fixtures. I'll probably redo a lot of it anyway. That gray color scheme is so depressing. I stared at her, speechless. Just some paint and fixtures. The dismissive comment about potentially undoing all my careful work was like salt in the wound. I think you're overreacting, my mother said. We're still giving you money to help with the transition. This isn't about the money, I replied, though of course the money was part of it. This is about betrayal. We had an agreement. I trusted you. Circumstances change, my father said firmly. Diana needs our help right now. I'm sorry if you feel it's unfair, but our decision is final. 30 days, Mason. I left the table without another word, retreating to my soon-to-be former apartment. Once inside, I sat on the couch I had carefully selected to fit the space and looked around at all my work. The recessed lighting I had painstakingly installed. The kitchen island I had built by hand. The custom shelving in the bedroom. All of it created with care and attention to detail, with the understanding that it was my home for at least a year. I pulled out my phone and flipped through the before and after photos I had taken throughout the renovation process. The transformation was remarkable. The dingy, unusable basement had become a stylish, comfortable apartment that had significantly increased the value of my parents' home. Unable to sleep, I called my best friend Garrett at nearly midnight. They're giving you 30 days. After everything you did to that basement, Garrett's outrage validated my own feelings. That's insane. And they're only offering $2,000. Yeah. Apparently Diana needs the space more than I do. I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. This is about Diana. Let me guess. Another one of her dreams failed, and now she's back home expecting everyone to accommodate her. Got it in one. Her fashion startup tanked, and now she's moving back with her boyfriend in tow. That's messed up, man. What are you going to do? I sighed, staring at the ceiling I had carefully painted. I don't know yet. Find an apartment, I guess. But I'm not just walking away from my investment. That's for damn sure. You can crash at my place if you need to, Garrett offered. Spare room is yours as long as you need it. The offer of genuine support almost broke me. Thanks, man. I might take you up on that. After ending the call, I lay awake for hours, cycling through shock, hurt, anger, and disbelief. How could my parents do this to me? How could they so casually disregard the agreement we had made? How could they value Diana's needs so far above mine? By morning, my hurt had crystallized into resolve. I would leave as requested, but not before ensuring I received fair compensation for my investment. If my parents wanted to treat our agreement as a simple business transaction rather than a family matter, then I would respond in kind. They would learn that betraying me had consequences. The morning after the bombshell announcement, I called in sick to work. I needed time to think and plan. My first call was to Bernard Collins, a lawyer who had done some contract work for my electrician business. I explained the situation and asked if I had any legal recourse. It's complicated because there's no written agreement, Bernard explained, but there's a legal concept called unjust enrichment that might apply here. Essentially, it means someone shouldn't benefit unfairly at another person's expense. That's exactly what's happening, I replied. They're getting a fully renovated basement apartment worth thousands more than what they're offering me. The key is documentation, Bernard advised. Can you prove what the basement looked like before? Do you have receipts for materials and appliances, photos of the work in progress? I have all of that. I documented the entire renovation process. Good. Here's what you should do next. Following Bernard's advice, I spent the day creating a detailed record of my investment in the basement. I organized receipts for every purchase, from major appliances to small items like switch plates and cabinet pulls. I compiled before, during, and after photos that showed the dramatic transformation. I created a spreadsheet itemizing labor hours, calculating what I would have charged a client for the same work. Next, I reached out to Jake, my contractor friend who had helped with parts of the renovation. I need your professional opinion on something, I explained before telling him what had happened. Jake was furious on my behalf. That's cold, man. Really cold. I need to know what items I can legally remove when I leave. Things that could be considered personal property, rather than permanent fixtures. Jake thought for a moment. Appliances for sure if you bought them. Lighting fixtures can be replaced with basic ones. The bathroom fixtures, cabinet hardware. Anything that could be reasonably removed without damaging the structure. I made a list, as he spoke already formulating a plan. What about the mini-split AC heating system I installed? That's a gray area. You could argue it's yours if you bought and installed it, but they might fight you on that one. I also researched rental prices in the area, collecting listings for comparable basement apartments. If my parents wanted to treat this as a landlord-tenant situation, they should have charged market rate rent, which would have been at least $1,200 monthly for a space like the one I created. 8 months of free rent would indeed be worth about $9,600, but that still left a significant gap between my investment and the compensation they offered. Armed with this information, I attempted another conversation with my parents. I laid out the documentation on their kitchen table, receipts, photos, labor calculations, and comparable rental listings. According to my calculations, I explained calmly, the total value of improvements I made is approximately $32,000, including materials and labor. Subtracting 8 months of market rate rent at $1,200 per month, that still leaves $22,400 that I have essentially gifted to you. My father barely glanced at the paperwork. This isn't a business transaction, Mason. It's a family matter. It became a business transaction when you decided to evict me from the space I created, I countered. I'm simply asking for fair compensation for my investment. We've already offered you $2,000, my mother said. That's generous considering you've lived here rent-free. Rent-free in exchange for renovations that increased your property value by over $30,000, I reminded them. $2,000 doesn't begin to cover it. What exactly are you asking for? My father demanded. $22,000. That's the value of my improvements, minus the rental value of my stay. My father laughed dismissively. That's ridiculous. We don't have that kind of money just sitting around. Then perhaps Diana should find her own apartment, and I should stay in the space I created as agreed. That's not happening, my mother said firmly. Diana needs our support right now. And I don't, I asked quietly. The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know about where I stood in their priorities. Our offer is $2,000, my father finally said. Take it or leave it. I gathered my documentation and stood up. Then I'll be taking everything that legally belongs to me when I leave. Every appliance, fixture, and feature that I purchased with my own money. You can't just strip the basement, my mother protested. Actually, I can. I have receipts for everything. Items I purchased remain my property, unless specifically gifted to you, which they weren't. My father's face reddened. This is how you want to handle this? Like some kind of mercenary? I learned from the best, I replied, coldly, leaving them staring after me in shock. Diana had been eavesdropping from the hallway. You're being incredibly selfish, she said as I passed. Mom and Dad have done everything for you. And nothing for you, right? I replied sarcastically. Enjoy the basement, Diana. What's left of it anyway? Back in my apartment, I began formulating my 3-phase exit strategy. Phase 1 was already complete documentation and legal consultation. Phase 2 would involve systematically removing everything I had a right to take. Phase 3 would be negotiating a final settlement from a position of strength. My parents had made a critical error in judgment. They assumed I would simply accept their decision and walk away from my investment. They were about to learn how wrong they were. With my strategy mapped out, I requested 2 weeks of vacation from work. My boss Gerald was surprised. I rarely took time off, but approved it without question. This would give me the uninterrupted time I needed to execute phase 2 of my plan. I started by hiring a professional home appraiser to document the current value of the basement apartment. The appraiser, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia, spent over 2 hours taking measurements, photos, and notes. Based on the quality of work here, I'd estimate these improvements add approximately $32,000 to $35,000 to the home's value, she concluded. The separate entrance alone adds significant value, not to mention the high-end bathroom and kitchen area. Her official report would take a few days, but she provided a preliminary assessment letter before leaving. This third-party validation of my work's value was exactly what I needed. Next, I created a detailed video walkthrough of the apartment, narrating each improvement I had made and highlighting items I had purchased. I was careful to timestamp the video and show close-ups of custom features. I also contacted friends who had helped with the renovation, asking them to provide signed statements confirming their involvement and the work completed. Several were outraged on my behalf and readily agreed. "Your parents are seriously doing this to you, my coworker," Rachel asked when I explained the situation. "After everything you did to that basement, apparently Diana's failed fashion career takes precedence over our agreement," I replied, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "That's cold," Rachel shook her head. "What can I do to help?" "Just sign this statement confirming you helped me install the recessed lighting. I'm building a case." With documentation complete, I began the systematic removal process. I started with the easy items: the television I had mounted on the wall, my clothing and personal belongings, small decorative items. These normal moving activities didn't raise any alarms with my parents, who seemed relieved I was complying with their timeline. On day 3, I began removing the first of the major items: the ceiling fans I had installed in the bedroom and living area. I carefully detached them, patched the ceiling, and installed basic light fixtures in their place. The mini-split AC heating system I had invested $3 200-inch was next. I had specifically chosen a model that could be uninstalled and reinstalled elsewhere, planning ahead for the possibility of eventually moving out. I spent half a day carefully removing it, sealing the wall penetrations and packaging it for transport to storage. By the end of the first week, my parents began to notice the changes. My mother came downstairs while I was removing the custom shower fixtures and replacing them with the basic builder-grade ones that had been there originally. "What are you doing?" she asked, alarmed. "Taking what belongs to me," I replied calmly, not pausing in my work. "I purchased these fixtures. Here's the receipt if you'd like to see it." She watched in dismay as I continued unscrewing the rainfall shower head. "But the bathroom won't be functional without a shower head. It will have the same basic shower head it had before I renovated. I'm not removing anything that would make the space unusable, just returning it to its original state, or replacing my purchases with basic equivalents." "This feels vindictive," she said quietly. I finally turned to look at her. Vindictive would be removing everything and leaving holes in the walls. I'm simply reclaiming my property while leaving the space in functional condition. If Diana wants luxury fixtures, she can purchase them herself, just like I did. My mother left without further comment, but I heard her and my father arguing upstairs that evening. The most dramatic confrontation came when I began disconnecting the stainless steel refrigerator stove and dishwasher I had purchased. Diana stormed downstairs, Trevor trailing behind her. "You can't take the appliances," she shouted. "How am I supposed to cook?" "The same way I was supposed to before I installed them. You aren't," I replied, continuing to unhook the water line from the refrigerator. "There was no kitchen here before I built one. If you want appliances, you can buy your own." "Mom, Dad," Diana yelled up the stairs. "Mason is gutting the kitchen." My father came downstairs, his face flushed with anger. "This has gone far enough, Mason. You're being childish." I straightened up and faced him. "I'm being childish. You broke our agreement, offered me a fraction of what my work is worth, and expected me to just accept it. Now you're upset that I'm taking my own property with me." "Those appliances are part of the house now," he insisted. "No, they're not. I have the receipts right here. I pulled the folder from my backpack and showed him the documentation. Purchased by me, installed by me, owned by me. I never gifted them to you or the house. I'll call the police if you keep this up, he threatened. Go ahead, I challenged. I've already consulted a lawyer. Everything I'm taking is legally mine, but by all means get the authorities involved. I'm sure they'd be interested to hear about how you're trying to claim ownership of property you didn't pay for. The mention of legal counsel gave him pause. He stared at me for a long moment, then at the half-dismantled kitchen. This isn't what we wanted, Mason. What did you want, Dad? For me to invest thousands of dollars and countless hours creating a beautiful living space, then simply hand it over to Diana because she failed in California. For me to quietly accept being devalued and dismissed. After everything I contributed to this house. He had no answer for that. By the end of the second week, the transformation was complete, in reverse. The basement was still improved from its original state. I couldn't remove the drywall flooring or structural changes, but all the high-end finishes, appliances, and fixtures that had made it special were gone, replaced with basic, functional equivalents, or removed entirely. My parents and Diana watched the dismantling with increasing alarm and frequent arguments, but they couldn't stop me. Every item I removed was clearly mine, documented with receipts and photographs. I was careful to maintain the basic habitability of the space. I wasn't trying to make it unlivable just to reclaim what was rightfully mine. As I neared completion of the removal process, my parents attempted to backtrack. Maybe we can work something out, my mother suggested tentatively. Perhaps you could stay a bit longer while Diana finds another option. Too late, I replied. I've already signed a month-to-month lease on an apartment. I move out this weekend. The truth was I had accepted Garrett's offer of temporary housing while I looked for a permanent place, but they didn't need to know that. The dismay on their faces when they realized their basement apartment was now a shadow of what it had been, and that I was actually leaving, gave me a small sense of satisfaction. With the physical removal complete, I moved on to Phase 3 legal and financial settlement. Bernard sent a formal demand letter outlining the improvements made their market value and the compensation sought. The letter included copies of the appraiser's report, receipts, before and after documentation, and witness statements. The demand was simple: $24,000 compensation for improvements made to the property, minus the $2,000 already offered, for a total of $22,000. The letter concluded with a note that if a satisfactory resolution wasn't reached within 10 days, we would pursue legal action for unjust enrichment. My parents received the letter 3 days after I moved out. I had expected anger, but their actual reaction surprised me. My father called his voice subdued. We need to talk about this letter from your lawyer. We arranged to meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. Both my parents arrived looking tired and somewhat defeated. $22,000 is still too much, my father began without preamble. The appraiser valued the improvements at $35,000, I countered. Even after accounting for my rent-free stay, $22,000 is more than fair. We don't have that kind of cash available, my mother said. You have home equity, I replied. The renovations I did increased your property value. You can take out a home equity loan. They exchanged glances. We've discussed it, my father admitted. We could potentially offer $18,000. 22, I maintained firmly. That's already a compromise from the full value. After another hour of negotiation, we settled on $24,000 total, prime, the original $2,000 they had offered, plus an additional $22,000. They would apply for a home equity loan the following week, with payment to be made within 30 days. I'll have Bernard draw up a settlement agreement, I said, as we concluded. Is this really necessary? My mother asked. The legal documents, the formal agreement, we're family. We were family when you broke our original agreement, I reminded her. This time everything will be in writing. 2 weeks later, we met at Bernard's office to sign the settlement agreement. My parents brought their own lawyer, looking uncomfortable as they reviewed the terms. Diana wasn't present, but I learned later that she was furious when she discovered my parents had given in to my demands. When the funds were finally transferred to my account a week later, I felt a complex mix of emotions, vindication certainly, but also sadness that our relationship had devolved to this point. What should have been a mutually beneficial arrangement had become a legal battle over money and property. But I had stood my ground and received fair compensation for my work. That was something. With the settlement money in hand, I began searching for a permanent place to live. Garrett had been generous with his spare room, but after a month of couch surfing, I was ready for my own space again. The housing market was tight, but the $24,000 settlement provided a substantial down payment option I hadn't had before. After viewing nearly 20 properties, I found a small 2-bedroom condo in a quiet complex, about 15 minutes from work. It needed some cosmetic updates, but had good bones, much like the basement had when I started. The asking price was reasonable, and with my down payment, the monthly mortgage would be less than typical rent in the area. "You're sure you want to buy instead of rent?" Garrett asked as he helped me move in. "That's a big commitment after everything that happened." "I'm done investing in other people's property," I replied. "At least this time any improvements I make will be mine to keep." The first few weeks in my new place were liberating. I unpacked slowly, setting up my rescued appliances and fixtures, planning the updates I would make. This space was truly mine. No one could take it away on a whim, or decide someone else deserved it more. The distance between my parents and me continued to grow. They called occasionally with awkward attempts at normal conversation, but the betrayal remained an unspoken barrier. I was polite, but brief, unwilling to pretend nothing had happened. Diana, meanwhile, was experiencing the reality of the now basic basement apartment. According to mutual friends, she had complained incessantly about the missing amenities. The basic bathroom fixtures, the lack of kitchen appliances, the inadequate heating and cooling system. My parents had purchased some replacement items, but not at the quality level I had installed. In late October, I received a text from my mother. "We're having Thanksgiving dinner at 2 p.m. We'd love for you to join us." I declined politely, explaining I had made other plans. In truth, I had accepted an invitation from Rachel and her family, unwilling to sit across the table from Diana and pretend all was well. As Christmas approached, the attempts at reconciliation increased. My father called one evening in early December. "Your mother misses you," he said without preamble. "We both do." "I miss aspects of our relationship too," I replied carefully. "But things are different now." "Can't we move past this?" he asked. "It's been months." "Moving past it requires acknowledgement of what happened," I explained. "You broke our agreement. You prioritized Diana's wants over my needs and the commitment you made to me. That fundamentally changed our relationship." "We made a mistake," he admitted, the first time either of them had acknowledged any wrongdoing. "We should have handled it differently." It was a start, but not enough for me to simply return to normal family relations. "I need time," I told him, "and clear boundaries going forward." Christmas came and went. I sent gifts but declined the invitation to dinner, spending the day instead with friends who had become more like family in recent months. In January, an unexpected visitor arrived at my condo, my father alone and looking uncomfortable on my doorstep. "Can I come in?" he asked. "I'd like to see what you've done with the place." I hesitated but stepped aside to let him enter. He walked slowly through the condo, nodding appreciatively at the improvements I'd already made. New paint, updated lighting, refinished cabinets. "You've got a real talent for this," he said, echoing words he'd spoken about the basement nearly a year earlier. "The place looks great." "Thanks," I replied, uncertain where this was heading. He sat heavily on my couch, looking older than I remembered. "I came to say I'm sorry," he said finally. "What we did to you was wrong. We got caught up in trying to help Diana, and didn't consider what it would do to you, to our relationship with you." The apology, though months overdue, still meant something. "I appreciate you saying that. Diana and Trevor broke up," he continued. "She's talking about moving to New York now. The basement might be empty again soon." I couldn't help but laugh. The classic Diana cycle. Chase a dream, fail, retreat home, make new plans, repeat. My father's mouth twitched. "That's not entirely fair, but not entirely wrong either." He sighed. "We've enabled her. I see that now, and we hurt you in the process." That acknowledgement began a slow healing process. I didn't immediately return to regular family dinners or holiday celebrations, but I did start accepting occasional invitations. Our relationship was different, more careful, more bounded, but it was a relationship nonetheless. Diana did indeed move out of the basement 2 months later, heading to New York with vague plans about fashion journalism. The basement apartment sat empty, a monument to misplaced priorities and broken trust. In a surprising development, my parents called in early spring, asking if I would help them fix an electrical issue in the house. The kitchen outlets keep tripping the breaker, my father explained. We got a quote from an electrician, but I thought maybe. It was an olive branch of sorts, an acknowledgement of my skills and a small step toward rebuilding trust. I agreed to take a look, spending a Sunday afternoon rewiring their kitchen circuit. We worked side by side in a way that felt familiar yet new, my father handing me tools while I explained what I was doing. "We miss having you around," he admitted as we finished up. "The house feels different without you." "I miss certain things too," I replied honestly. "But I'm happy in my condo. It's important for me to have my own space that no one can take away." He nodded, understanding the subtext. "You've done well for yourself, Mason. I'm proud of how you handled everything, even though it was hard for us at the time." That comment, simple as it was, helped heal something in me. The acknowledgement that I had been right to stand up for myself, to demand fair treatment, validated the difficult stand I had taken. Over the following months, my career continued to thrive. The confidence I had gained from standing up to my parents translated into assertiveness at work. I successfully negotiated a promotion and raised my rates for side jobs. I began dating again, approaching relationships with clearer boundaries and expectations. 6 months after moving out, I received an unexpected invitation. My parents wanted my opinion on a potential kitchen renovation. "Nothing major," my mother explained over the phone. "But we're thinking about updating the cabinets and countertops. You have such a good eye for these things." I politely declined to take on the project myself, but offered advice on materials and layout. "I can recommend a good contractor," I told them. "Jake did excellent work on my condo bathroom." They accepted the recommendation without pressing for more involvement from me. A small but significant respect for my boundaries that I appreciated. Nearly a year after the eviction, my parents invited me to dinner at their house. I arrived to find only the three of us. No Diana, no drama. My mother had prepared my favorite meal, reminiscent of that fateful Sunday dinner, but this time without ulterior motives. Over dessert, my father cleared his throat. "We want you to know that we understand now how badly we handled the situation with the basement. Breaking our agreement with you was wrong, and trying to undervalue your contribution was worse." My mother reached across the table to touch my hand. "We let our tendency to rush to Diana's rescue cloud our judgment. It cost us your trust, and nearly cost us our relationship with you." I appreciate that, I said, genuinely moved by their acknowledgement. It took me a while to understand that this wasn't just about the basement or the money. It was about feeling like my contributions and needs didn't matter as much as Diana's. "They do matter," my father insisted. "We lost sight of that temporarily, but never again." Remarkably, Diana herself called me a few weeks later. Her New York adventure had ended predictably. Another failed attempt, another retreat. But this time she had rented her own apartment instead of moving back to our parents' basement. "I get it now," she admitted. "What it means to create your own space, to invest in something, and have it be yours. I was wrong to expect them to give me your apartment, and I was wrong about how easy it would be to replace what you built." Her apology, while not changing the past, provided a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. As I look back on that turbulent year, I realize that standing up for myself changed more than just my living situation. It transformed my relationship with my family, establishing boundaries and respect that hadn't existed before. It boosted my confidence and self-worth in ways that extended to every area of my life. And perhaps most importantly, it taught my parents and sister valuable lessons about fairness, consequences, and the true meaning of family support. It's been just over a year since I moved out of my parents' basement apartment, and looking back, I can see how that painful experience transformed my life in unexpected ways. My condo has become the home I always wanted. I've painted every room, installed new flooring in the kitchen, and upgraded the bathroom with some of the fixtures I salvaged from the basement. Each improvement feels different knowing it's mine, to keep mine, to enjoy mine, to benefit from if I ever decide to sell. The relationship with my parents has found a new equilibrium. We'll never return to the blind trust I once had, but in many ways our current relationship is healthier. There are clear boundaries now, mutual respect, and a shared understanding that family bonds don't give anyone the right to take advantage of another. We have dinner together once a month. Always at a restaurant or my place, never at their house. Some wounds heal but leave scars that remind us to be more careful next time. Diana and I have reached a cautious truce. Her latest venture, a small online boutique selling curated vintage clothing, seems more grounded than her previous dreams. She even asked for my advice on setting up reliable payment processing on her website. The basement apartment saga taught her something too, it seems, about consequences, about appreciation for others' work, about the reality that dreams require practical foundations. The settlement money changed my financial trajectory, allowing me to become a homeowner years earlier than I would have otherwise. But the most valuable things I gained from the experience weren't financial. I learned to document everything, even with family. I learned that standing up for myself doesn't make me selfish or unreasonable. I learned that my work has value that deserves recognition and fair compensation. These lessons have served me well beyond family matters. At work, I'm no longer the guy who takes on extra projects without recognition or compensation. I've become more assertive about my contributions and more confident in negotiating rates that reflect my skills. My boss Gerald recently commented that he respects my professionalism and clear boundaries, qualities that emerged directly from the basement apartment conflict. In personal relationships too, I've changed. I'm more careful about establishing clear expectations and agreements. I'm quicker to address potential issues rather than assuming they'll work themselves out. And I'm far better at recognizing when someone is taking advantage of my good nature or work ethic. The experience also taught me about forgiveness. Not the blind, automatic forgiveness that pretends harm never happened, but the measured, mindful forgiveness that acknowledges wrong while choosing to move forward. I've forgiven my parents and Diana, not because what they did was acceptable, but because holding on to anger would only limit my own happiness and growth. Perhaps most importantly, I've learned that self-respect must come before seeking others' respect. When I demonstrated that I valued my own work and contribution enough to demand fair treatment, others began to value me more highly too. The confidence I gained from standing firm in that difficult family situation has rippled through every aspect of my life. Last week I hosted a small dinner party at my condo, my parents, a few close friends, even Diana. As we gathered around the table, I built myself using the salvaged appliances from the basement to prepare the meal. There was a moment when my father raised his glass in a toast. To Mason, he said, who taught us all, that true family strength comes not from blind accommodation but from mutual respect and fairness. I could see in his eyes that he meant it, that the hard lessons of the past year had genuinely changed his perspective. In that moment I realized that by refusing to be devalued I had ultimately created the possibility for a healthier family dynamic for all of us. So if you're facing a situation where your contributions are being minimized or taken for granted, whether with family, friends, or colleagues, remember that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Document your work. Know your worth. Establish clear agreements. And if those agreements are broken, be prepared to advocate for yourself with confidence and determination. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who took advantage of your generosity? What did you do, and how did it change your relationship? Let me know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life experiences and lessons learned the hard way. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the most important respect you can earn is your own. Take care of yourselves, and don't let anyone renovation your self-worth.